Well, good morning, everybody, here from the Temple of Silence in Finland. I guess when I'm talking, it's not quite so silent, but it has a deep meaning in terms of what we try to do here. Um, we are now on program number 10 in this group of commentaries on second initiation references. And we're studying topically at this time, as Master DK advised us to do. So, we have reached the point where we're talking about the effect of the sixth ray on the disciple, preparing for the second initiation. You know how it works. The seventh ray is most associated with the first initiation, sixth with the second, fifth with the third initiation, fourth with the fourth initiation, and the first ray with the fifth initiation. The third ray is associated with the uh, sixth initiation, and the second ray with the seventh initiation. Okay, so let's see what he has to say here. The effect of the sixth ray activity upon the mental nature, as you may imagine, is a tendency, first of all, to the crystallizing of thought. We get into this idée fixe idea where people can pretty much only think one thing and emphasize only that. A reaction to imprisoning ideologies, and certainly there are certain readings of the scriptures and the holy books, the Bible, let us say, which are deeply imprisoning and will not allow a wider consideration, and a fanatical mental adherence to mass ideals and their promotion. We can see this everywhere as we look into society and how certain ideals are advanced, with no understanding of their relationship to the need of the time or to their intended creative aspects. And we can understand why this leads to friction, cleavage, war, and so forth. The mind just is not broad enough, is not flexible enough, and even though the sixth ray is a ray having mostly to do with the astral body, it does naturally, like all the rays that impinge, affect the mind as well for people who are at this stage and have not yet subdued their tendency to adhere to crystallized thought. Okay, I'm really trying to make sure that this is adequately heard. Later, as the disciple prepares for the second initiation, these tendencies are transformed into spiritual devotion to human welfare and to a one-pointed adherence to the plan for hierarchy. So this is what is expected, and if we find people being fanatical and narrow-minded and inflexible, uh, narrow and fixed in their thinking, then we know that they are not ready for the second initiation. All emotional reaction to the hierarchy of master fades out, and the disciple can now work without being hindered by constant astral disturbances. This is one of the features of the second ray of the second initiation. The second ray is involved in it, calming things down, of course. A feature of the second initiation that astral disturbances will be increasingly subdued. That's the idea. And if we can look at I think we can look at Venus there, Jupiter there, even Neptune there. Now, Mars, an earlier planet that has to be subdued in relation to this initiation, does cause disturbances, and Pluto will bring everything to the surface, and that's disturbing. And let's see, Vulcan will put on the pressure where from the soul that does not allow us to be running with our emotions. But the other planets, and maybe especially Venus, helps to calm the story and end the astral disturbance. So I think it's, the Buddha, we are told, had the sixth ray mind. Uh, there's high and low versions of that. The Catholic Church, we're told, also in its centuries old dogmatism, had the sixth ray mind as well. But for the Buddha, it was an understanding of how to overcome desire and what a true idealism was. And from a certain perspective, the control of the mind by the even the monadic plane. He was, we have assumed, taking the sixth initiation, and from that he moved on to the path of earth service, which the Tibetan says was not really his path at all. Okay, but such was his compassion on the second ray soul, even though he had the third ray monad. And there's more to it up on those high levels because there are at least, I think there are two monadic rays, and I've tried to explain why I think so. He had the great compassion and the acute energy of divine mental perception on the third ray as well, but it didn't get in the way of his compassion, that's for sure. So he took the path of earth service out of that compassion, and it's an amazing thing that when we think of the next solar system according to the Tibetan, he's telling us that the second ray will be the ray which gets in the way of the divine will. Uh, right now, the members of the counterforce use very much the manipulative third ray, but in the next solar system, they're probably going to use the attachment of a certain interpretation of love to get in the way of what the first ray has to accomplish in that first ray solar system. Anyway, the emotional reaction, which we see, when we look at the church services on television and whatnot, we look at the preachers and all the rest of it. It's a very emotional approach. It's not a thoughtful, invocative approach, but that's coming. Okay. Anyway, do we feel in our hearts the spiritual devotion to human welfare and the one pointed, there's your sixth ray, one pointed adherence to the plan of the hierarchy? Excuse me, it is for us to judge as we assess with as much honesty as we can manage the condition in which we are in. Now, here's something about the duty of the members of the new group of world servers and how to recognize a second degree initiate. When they, I just filled this in, the members of the new group of world servers discover, this is an important paragraph, and it also involves something of the first initiation, and we'll discuss this later. When they discover those who are seeking mental polarization, which really, remember, mental focus is one thing, and they seek that, but polarization comes between the second and third initiation. Mental polarization comes between the second and third initiation, and who evidence a desire and an aspiration to think and to know, coupled with the distinguishing marks of those who have taken the first initiation, they can, in all probability, safely assume that such people have taken the second initiation or on the verge of doing so. And I think this certainly included a lot of DK's disciples, with first degree, the interest in the spiritual work. It doesn't necessarily have to be deep occultism. I'm sure there are many on different rays who are interested in the spiritual work from a slightly less technical point of view, and maybe even apply it for the welfare of humanity better than many students of occultism. Also, the urge to beautify the life is there, and the disciplining of the life is there. These are some of the signs of those who are on the verge of taking the second initiation. The control by the energies running through the etheric body of the dense physical instinctual tendencies. Maybe nobody is entirely free of these, but at least they don't run away with the show and make it impossible to do the spiritual work. So the new group of world servers actually are in a fairly advanced position, and I think it's assumed that the real members are initiates of the second degree. So they have to look for those who are on the verge of taking the second degree, because having been through it themselves and being in a position to help, they can observe and identify those who are coming along. So then the duty of these world servers will be clear. It is by this close observation on the part of the world servers that the ranks of the new group are filled. And so, becoming second degree initiates are brought into the new group of world servers. It can be a very, following the second degree can be a very dangerous time, and people are very well equipped to be selfish if they would be. And we've seen that over and over again. And they do not pass the temptations in the desert. The world, the flesh, and the devil capture them in some way. The symbolism of those three being a third, second, and first ray. So, so we want to fill the ranks of the new group of world servers, really help humanity rise, and those who have passed through the second degree have to be watchful and help to attract and orient those who could possibly help. Today, the opportunity and the stimulation are so great that all servers must keep alert, developing in themselves the ability to register the quality for which search must be made, and giving the help and guidance. See, that's it, because, even at that point, at the second degree, help and guidance is still needed. Otherwise, the misuse and the veering off towards the left can occur. And we don't want that. The third ray personality of the planet may induce in that direction. But we have to get into the second ray soul of our planet, and the battle between the second and third ray is archetypal. It's the soul personality battle, and we have to make sure that people who pass the second degree use all of their abilities to help along the line of love wisdom in general. So giving the help and guidance, which will weld into one cooperative band those disciples and initiates who should prepare the way for the Christ, and not just along the religious lines, of course, but along the lines of all the 7 ashrams. And that, DK has told us that the fact that spirituality is only conceived in religious terms is one of the great victories of the Black Lodge. So that would be, too bad if we fall into all of those old patterns. So we'll come to a position here. Let's see. I wonder if I should take a little journey here, and we'll call this AAB diagram. No, not AAB diagrams. We'll call it AAB extracts, and we'll look for first initiation, and we'll look for here the first and second together. All right, so here are the first and second initiations together. Now here we have a reference which is really important and relates to the one we just talked about. Members of the new group of world servers should watch with care for all those who show signs of having passed through the birth experience, and they should help them towards a greater maturity. So they're on the lookout for those who are passing through the first degree. And here is the statement: they should assume that all those who truly love their fellow men who are interested in the esoteric teaching, or let's just say some true spiritual teaching, and who seek to discipline themselves in order to attain greater beauty of life are initiate and have undergone the first initiation. I think maybe the most demanding of those is to truly love one's fellow men. Now, go on. When they discover those who are seeking mental polarization, and we've just read this, you see, but now it's in contrast to this foundation of the first degree. When they discover those who are seeking mental polarization and who evidence a desire and aspiration to think and know, coupled with the distinguishing marks of those who have taken the first initiation, they can in all probability safely assume that such people have taken the second initiation or are on the verge of doing so. I always try to remember that page 667 in Raised and Initiations. I think it's that book. Uh, because so many of us are passing through the first or second initiation. And here are really given the epitomes of the requirements of those two initiations. And notice the mentality that is required here regarding the second initiation, even though it's the elevation of the solar plexus to the heart. I also want to read just a little bit, if I can. Well, we'll get into this idea of the first initiation characteristics later. But here's some information on the Black brothers and the first and second initiation. Um, so I guess it's down here perhaps. I would point out that even the Black magician possesses these qualities, these character developments, for they are the sine qua non, without which you can't have it, of all magical art, both black and white. The Black magician, or, well, at least the one tending towards that and treading the left hand path, passes through the door of initiation as it opens twice for the first two initiations. What a decision has to be made after that. It's quite astonishing, isn't it, that such an individual could face the head of the hierarchy, whether it's the Christ or someone preceding him, and still veer off in that direction. So it opens twice for the first two initiation. He passes through on the strength of his will and his character accomplishments. And because the group conscious aspect of the soul is active in him, as in his brothers seeking affiliation with the Great White Lodge. The love aspect is, however, lacking in the Black magician, and of course, this must be assessed and seen naturally by the Hierophant for that initiation. I guess it depends to a degree on the rays. We've been told that most of the Black magicians, maybe all, have the first ray soul, and I do think the third ray monad is involved. So when you have the first and third rays active without the second, you have the possibility of manipulation and loveless enforcement of your own will upon others. The love aspect is, however, lacking in the Black magician. Forget not that all is energy and there is nothing else. The energy, which is an aspect of the soul and which we call magnetic attraction, the group building quality, he shares with the spiritual aspirant. He is essentially group conscious, and though his motives are separative, his methods are those of the group, and these he can get only from the soul. So there is some connection with the soul energy here, but it is still, it's been appropriated in a selfish way. Now let's look a little more. You see yet another reason why the first and second initiations are not regarded by the Lodge of Masters as major initiations. Only the third is so regarded because at that initiation, the entire personality life is flooded with energy coming from the spiritual triad via the sacrifice petals. So, especially from the monastic permanent atom And I think, to an extent, Buddhic energy, yes, and the energy of the spiritual will, not in full measure, but usefully so, via the sacrifice petals of will and purpose aspect of the soul. To this type of energy, and this is really important, the black magician is not responsive. He can and does respond to the knowledge, most ancient and hardly won. He fought for it, and so do we all, stored up in the knowledge petal uh, of the souls he can appropriate and utilize, okay, of the soul. And I suppose this is really meant to be something like this. He can appropriate and utilize the energy of attraction, erroneously called love by some students, stored up in the love petals of the soul, but he cannot respond to the use and energy of divine love working out in the divine plan, which controls all knowledge and converts it to wisdom, into wisdom, and which accentuates and clarifies the motive, which brings loving magnetic attraction into action, and which we call true group consciousness and group cohesion. It is at this point that the two ways, the ways of darkness and of light, become widely divergent. Until the third initiation is taken, glamour may condition the attitude. So, even after the second degree, there's some degree of glamour. We understand that, of those seeking to understand the life of the man upon the path, and they may mistake the spurious for the real. So we all may be misled by teachers who actually are not taking us with their teaching in the right direction. We can be deceived. The black magician leads a disciplined life, analogous to that of the spiritual aspirant. He practices purity for his own safeguarding and not in order that he may become a channel for the energy of light. He works with power, the power of magnetic attraction with and in groups, but he does this for his own selfish ends and for the fulfillment of his own ambitious purposes. But at the third initiation, there comes to the true spiritual initiate the revelation, which is the reward of perseverance and purity, rightly motivated. The black magician has perseverance and purity, wrongly motivated. The revelation of the divine purpose as the soul records it. Not the full revelation, but an extensive revelation in terms of the hierarchical plan, though not yet in terms of the monad, right? To this purpose and to the loving will of God, to use the trite Christian phrase, the black brother cannot respond. His aims are different. Okay, so, well, I think sometime we'll have to have a discussion of of this entire thing regarding the black brothers, and my guess is that compilations have been made which are very valuable, and I have to applaud those wonderful compilations made by Zach Rymel over many years, and this looks like a section of one of them, um, which are really so very complete. There's one on Shambhala that we want to undertake. So this is a little bit of a diversion here, perhaps, but at least it explains the difference uh, between the black brother and the white brother, and also the approach to the second initiation. Okay, okay, right. We continue. All right, we continue. I hope so often I'm losing my chronometer, and the programs end up being either a little shorter or a little longer than they ought to be. All right. So now we're talking about the Atlantean influence and humanity's facing of the second initiation. It isn't really yet as a whole facing the second initiation. It's facing the first, but even that is a great challenge, as we can see the negative forces of Pluto and even of Vulcan. We can call it the eruption of long stored psychological negativity, and also the weaponry of Vulcan all coming in, supporting our fears and our selfishness, which long should have been overcome. So Vulcan is definitely useful to Mars, in creating the weaponry of war. When you look at those three planets together, Mars, Pluto, and Vulcan, you see two non-sacreds and one sacred planet, but they all can manifest in a negative way, and we have to learn how to overcome that negativity. Humanity right now is flooded with negativity, as we would expect when the Christ is ready to reappear. It is the same in the life of the aspirant. All that negativity, unsuspected, long stored, at the bottom of the aura, so to speak, is raised into visibility, and it can be a shocking thing. Can be a shocking thing, but persistence will help overcome it. Okay, distressing as all this may be, and significant of the end of this age and the cessation of the Atlantean vibration, the strictly emotional vibration and quality, which has carried over so potently in this Aryan cycle. Note that we probably should be far more rid of it than we are. It is, however, indicative of the attainment of a definitely racial opportunity. Humanity on a relatively large scale, it is not giving us the numbers, but there are thousands, is facing the second initiation or baptism. But so often this comes with grief. The waters flow, and then the second part of the second initiation, that of fire, the baptism by fire, can enter. You kind of wonder, when you think about Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the dropping of the atomic bomb, baptism by fire, and how the Japanese now feel about nuclear energy of any kind, and how they're at the forefront of trying to prevent any recurrence of that. You wonder about the karma of the United States that dropped that bomb. And DK looked at it all as if it was a great spiritual event, but that was estimated from a very high perspective about the overcoming of the materialistic thought form. All right, what is this vision accorded to the second degree initiate? At the third initiation, the control of the soul illumined mind, let's think about Venus, is finally established. And the soul itself assumes the dominant position and not the phenomenal form. So there's something decisive has happened at the first solar initiation. Okay, something decisive at the first solar initiation. All the limits of the form nature are then transcended. All the decay does tell us, though they do recur, but are not inhibitory in the same way they have been. I mean, there are initiates beyond the third degree who do things we may wonder why, and they are indicative, not of complete control, but they are never allowed to block or inhibit the full service to the plan. It is the vision of this transcendence, transfiguration, which is communicated at the time of the second initiation under the symbolism of a positively applied purification. So Sagittarius is involved with its vision at the second initiation, and the way ahead to transcendence. Oh, how about spelling that correctly? Is indicated. So, from Sagittarius to Capricorn, from the vision to the realization itself at the third degree. And obviously, with the kinds of things that DK has written, he does want us to have that third degree in sight, so we really understand it. In a way, it's a movement from Jupiter to Venus, interestingly. Jupiter, the planet of vision, and Venus, of course, has to do with that as well, but Venus, the planet of supernal light, which we actually experience having fulfilled many karmic factors on our way up the mountain. We put our foot upon the mountain of karma, and then find ourselves standing upon the mount of true initiation. All this is a beautiful system. Probably there are many other ways to describe it, and the technical language of occultism is not always needed. But DK has given us a system which is beautifully rational and can be a firm guide to the people who strive to expand their consciousness and deepen their sense of being and serve their fellow men better and more completely. So we're very, our gratitude goes out to Master DK, Master KH, the Christ, the hierarchy, Sanat Kumara for allowing this to come forward to us, allowing this to be presented to us and to really help make sense out of our lives. I'm remembering Madame Blavatsky saying there are some people for whom theosophy is their last hope. And I really could relate to that, and maybe you can too, and maybe for humanity at a certain point, an understanding of the ageless wisdom is its last hope. So onward we go as part of this great second ray spiritual propaganda effort, the propagating of ideas which are useful to create a different vision for humanity, one that is really wholesome, and not childish. Okay, now what about the second initiation and the difficulty of it as we are applying fire to water? So the second initiation, as now undergone, is to some extent, one of the most difficult. For certain types, he seems to say it is the most difficult. For those on the first ray and those on the second ray, 246 line, it involves purification, but it is a purification by fire, symbolically understood. And immediately, I think of solar fire here when I think of that type of purification. The occult application of fire to water produces certain most serious and devastating effects, and we might say, along the way. The water under the action of fire is resolved into steam, and the initiate is immersed in the fogs and miasmas. So we might say before the second initiation, this is happening, and there are many glamours to address, hopefully mostly cleared by the time the second degree occurs. The glamours and the mists are thus caused. The initiate is immersed in the fogs and miasmas, the glamours and the mists thus caused, and it's impossible to see the truth as it is. But obviously, a great clarification is going to occur at the second degree and beyond, and certainly by the third degree, we should be seeing things more and more as they are. Though the amazing thing is that even up to the ninth initiation, a form of illusion is still operative, he tells us. Out of this fog and out of the glamours, the initiate must emerge. Out of the present fog of human affairs, humanity will also emerge eventually. I mean, we see people doing stupid things, but they don't see clearly. And that's the problem with the condition of the psyche as it is at the moment. The success of the individual initiate is the guarantee of the racial destiny. And during the age of Aquarius, an age when the fifth ray is very, very strong, and thus clarity of thinking and that beam of the ajna center, which can be revelatory and destructive, a lot of this destiny will be fulfilled. Something about Aquarius, starting at the sign Pisces and moving in a clockwise direction. Aquarius has much to do with the position number 2, and thus with the second initiation and with the general cleansing, which occurs when the purifying waters are released. And these waters are even as fires because they represent high fiery energies which are purifying as well. The complications produced by water in conjunction with fire in these Aryan days are far greater than those produced entirely by water in Atlantean days. So we have a greater problem to solve. A greater problem to PRB? No. Okay, to solve. And this is the Kama Manasic problem where we cannot really distinguish thinking from feeling. And I'm recalling the work of Carl Jung where he talked about feeling toned thoughts. And that's very much the Kama Manas to which many people are associated. They cannot detach their mind from what they are considering, and the emotion accompanies their thinking, which perhaps obscures the truth significantly. So this age is Kama-Manasic and not simply Kamic or strictly astral. We'd have to go way back into Atlantis, I think, to find the strictly Kamic time. Remember, therefore, as you read these words, that I am speaking symbolically of certainly of fire and water, although the elementals of fire and those of water are involved. Maybe, the Agnisurians and the lower Agnichitans. Not Agnichitans, but Agnishvatas. The fire of mind today has to be reckoned with in conjunction with the water of desire. And, mind can strengthen desire. And it is owing to this that much of humanity's problem develops. It is because of this that the second initiation has become one of the most difficult, which the modern disciple has to take. And I might add, especially uh, especially on our planet, with its unresolved cosmic astral issues and its tendency to be afflicted by the glamour of personality on a more systemic, vaster level. So we have much to disentangle here, and clear thinking is so very, very needed. Regardless of what you prefer, regardless of what your bias may be, the application of the mind in its fifth ray mode, which will be strengthened during the age of Aquarius, is very needed. We're learning a lot about energies, and we're learning that in the future we will be dealing with an energy approach to reality. It will be much more scientific, but certainly not without heart and not without the sense of unity. Okay, we go on a little bit here. The goal facing the initiate of the second degree. We're still in, oh, that's a long one here, huh? We're still in the rays and the initiations. Wonderful book. And one that is not as easily assimilated as people might hope. I mean, it's really the bridging book to what may be given. It's very exciting to think about what may yet be given by the Tibetan in this third installment. But if we're not excited by what has already been given, and if we do not desire to assimilate it as thoroughly as possible and to apply it as best we can, then we're only, well, you can't really consider ourselves worthy of the next dispensation. So, I look ahead at these 7 years and it will be intensifying as we go, but I just think these 7 years before 2025 have to be utilized to assimilate and apply. How much can we assimilate? Well, never the whole thing. DK says, I've given you more than you can ever absorb, and he's absolutely correct about that. All we have to do is try with depth to absorb these factors, and we just know that it's just tremendous what we've been given, even though it's just the ABC, as he would say, ABCs. Yet we must try, and with no relinquishing of our effective work in the world simply because we're trying to understand broadly and assimilate. The two things have to go hand in hand. Okay, what is the basic goal of the initiate who has taken the second initiation? I would ask you to transit in consciousness from the concept that the process of initiation is a consummation of effort, like just a ceremony, let us say, to the higher and better concept that it is initiatory in effect and marks the beginning and not a consummation, because that whole idea of consummation sometimes means we rest on our laurels we have achieved and we go no further. I mean, there are some people who think that what a human being can achieve in terms of enlightenment in the matter that the Buddha described, have achieved all that can be achieved in the universe, and that a planetary logos or solar logos or God knows what type of logos could do no more. But that doesn't seem wise. Doesn't seem wise to me. It's uh, it's just the beginning of new possibilities. So what therefore lies ahead of the initiate who has entered the purificatory water or fire? Right. Let's just say, like the disciples at Pentecost, swimming in the fire, not just the water. And here we have, of course, a pledged disciple, naturally, if the person has taken the second degree, and in most cases, and probably an accepted disciple. So, to what is the disciple here, still a disciple, pledged? What is to happen within the area of livingness? I want you to familiarize yourself with that phrase. And what results will take place within the mechanism with which, I don't know why those commas are there, they're just in the strangest places, with which he approaches the place of initiation. So, area of livingness. Well, we all desire more livingness, higher vibration, higher sensitivity, higher sense of, more complete sense of being. And with every increasing point of tension, there is an increasing sense of livingness. So, what are the results which will take place within the mechanism with which he approaches the place of initiation? Because our mechanism has to be properly fitted to receive the higher contacts, and that's often a difficult situation as the higher energies come in and cause friction and distress and disease and turbulence and all those things which eventually have to result in a calmer situation. So these are the factors of importance, and these are the aspects of the life process which should condition him. What are we beginning? I'm reminded here, Master Moria, for us, there are only beginnings, something like that. And every ending is really a beginning, and we have the initiatory attitude. We're always going forward into new possibilities, and the present is always better than the past, and that which lies ahead is always better than the present. So we have a way of moving forward into greater and greater illumination, which we've done endlessly, of course. We're just tiny little extensions of the one universal life which knows all that can be known within its own finitude. Well, Alice Bailey said, as the Tibetan was dictating to her, vast vistas appeared of not related to related to what he was saying, but not given concretely in what he was saying. And she was just amazed at the possibilities. And I feel oftentimes that way too, just with what is presented here. Goodness, what more lies ahead, and just the tiniest fragment or fraction of which we can come to terms with at this point in time and space. So, at the close of the initiatory process, certain energies and divine aspects should be recognized by him as now playing a part in his thinking and his purposes, energies which, heretofore, even if present, were quiescent and not controlling. So, what do we want to call this? The recognition of positive change following the INY initiatory process. Okay, so now I feel like I've done this, but every time you reapproach it, something new comes into focus. And the last part of the book, The Rays and the Initiations, has been done in these video commentaries. And That's several hundred pages, or at least a few hundred pages. So these pages are familiar to me, but something different will be always said if you have time to listen to it and possibly, hopefully, gain some inspiration from it. Anyway, before him lies the third initiation of the Transfiguration. Facing him is a great transition from an emotional, aspirational focus to an intelligent, thinking focus. Now, is that despite the rays that are operative? It would seem to me that certain rays will have the intelligent thinking focus naturally and will have to somehow increase the love and intuitive focus. He has theoretically, at least, and that's the point, not everything is perfection. He has theoretically at least cast off the control of the astral body and nature. It does reappear, but does not inhibit. So it does reappear, but does not inhibit as it has. Much still remains to be done. Old desires, ancient astral reactions, and habitual emotions are still powerful. Now, let's remember, even after the second degree, this is the case. Amazingly so. But he has developed a new attitude to them, and that's the important thing, and a new perspective to the astral body. A new attitude uh, based upon his elevation following the second initiation, following. Just try to be fast and see what happens. Water, fire, steam, glamour, delusion, misinterpretation, and emotional continuity, ongoing emotional attitude, still means something specific and undesirable to him. Yes, he still is acquainted with these things, they just don't disappear overnight, right? He is now negative to their appeal and positive to his higher demanding forces, meaning he no longer is lured in the same way. He recognizes, but he's not lured into a situation where he's overcome by these factors and misled and stopped from further progress. He is now negative to their appeal. He recognizes them, but they don't appeal to him, and positive to the higher demanding forces, which will be strongly evident at the third degree. That which he now loves and longs for, he still has desires, right? Aspires, desires and plans for, lies in another and higher dimension. So let's just say his aspirational nature is still very alive. He has, through his willingness to pass through the second initiation, and notice willingness, notice here, factor of will in passing through this initiation, and remember how Vulcan and Mars are still involved in this initiation. Will overcoming selfishness, the will of the soul overcoming selfishness and intensifying as we move towards the third degree. He has, through his willingness to pass through the second initiation, struck the first blow at his innate selfishness and has demonstrated his determination to think in wider and more inclusive terms. Now, that's a really important summary uh, summary of what happens at the second degree. The blow, the first blow, not the final blow, has been struck at his innate selfishness. He can't help it, it's built in. That's how he has risen. We have to be selfish, it seems, at first, in order to increase our capabilities, and then we have to relinquish that which selfishness has given us for a type of selflessness, which considers the wider picture and the welfare of the other. And here the group begins to mean more to him than himself. The group of humanity, and it's not just saving your own hide. It's how Yeah, and we get this in the family, you know, sacrifices are made almost involuntarily, but people learn that they will sacrifice themselves for their children. And that's maybe the first group where this becomes very, very evident. And later for their nation, you know, and for their esoteric group, and finally for humanity as a whole, or for the planet later, um, the little self is given up for the welfare of the greater appreciated self. So what has happened technically speaking? The energies of the solar plexus center are being transferred from the major clearinghouse below the diaphragm to the heart center, one of the three major centers into which, look at those funny commas, into which all the lower energies must transfer. At the first initiation, he was granted a vision of a higher creativity, and the energy of the sacral center began its slow ascent. Slow, slow, not just finished at the second degree, just like the interior petals, the sacrifice petals, begin to really open at the first degree. They don't all open until the third. So there's a slow process for the earlier ones. The slow ascent to the throat center. Throat center involves throat center involves a type of creativity which is higher than procreativity, procreation, which is still necessary, of course, to provide the vehicles for the incoming human beings. And that's maybe that's the tendency, you know, of the people who are earlier in their experience to have many more children than those are who are later in their developmental experience. We all have trodden the same way. And if we look back, we will see ourselves in those various situations doing the things that are required at those stages. At the second initiation, he is granted a vision of a higher focus, and his place in the larger whole begins to reveal itself. A new creativity and a new focus become his immediate goals, and for him, life can never again be the same, and the throat center becomes creatively very active. The old physical attitudes and desires may still at times assume control. Now, this is realistic, right? If we look for perfection in anybody, we're not going to find it even the higher teachers. And probably the masters would say, you know, we're not perfect. And Jesus, or maybe the Christ through him, say, why call you me good? Only God is good. So he knew his own imperfections. Selfishness may continue to play a potent part in his life expression, but underlying and supporting them will, underlying these and supporting them will be found a deep dissatisfaction about things as they are and an agonizing realization of failure. And when we were discussing ISGL, the man who was, for whom it was truly possible to take the second degree, even though apparently he did not, DK talked about these recriminations and dissatisfactions and the agony of it, you know, agonizing towards the goal as the second ray type tends to do. And that's what he was essentially, even though his soul ray was transferring from the sixth. He was essentially the second ray soul agonizing to the goal, but maybe we all have that regardless of what our ray is. It is at this point that the disciple begins to learn the uses of failure and to know certain fundamental distinctions between that which is natural, objective, and that which is supernatural and subjective, you know. So when we learn the uses of failure, we go forward on the basis of what we have learned and do not sit in a puddle of self-pity. One of the causes of glamour, you know, self-pity, suspicion, and criticism. So the uses of failure. Well, we've all failed. All have failed. He tells us, and all will fail again. And we will try, and it turns out to be true that if at first you don't succeed, try again. We will and must return to our true spiritual state. It's just a question of how we go about it and how we use the lessons of failure without becoming discouraged. I'm remembering one of the disciples, RSU, who really got into some trouble toward the end of her career, and DK recognized that, but he told her to lift her face to the light, and even though the tears were streaming, to go forward hopefully. You know, he's been through it all that we have to be through, and he encourages us in a wise manner, never promising too much, but certainly encouraging us. Do these ideas make the concept of initiation any more useful to you and more practical? Well, I hope so. I hope so. Any initiation which does not find interpretation in daily reactions is of small service and basically unreal. So we have many conceptions at first about what initiation is and how it may remove us from the immediate sphere of obligation and take away our pain. Decade calls it, with regard to this planet, the dire pain of life itself. But that's not real. And as we've seen, the Christ plunged himself into the very depth of difficulty and dealt with it. It is the unreality of its presentation which has led to the rejection of the Theosophical Society as an agent of the hierarchy at this time. Now he leaves the door open. The door is left open to a future usefulness. Hmm. So, and I think we learned that about initiation, especially with the very first sign of real initiation, Capricorn, so associated with the third degree, the first real degree, that it's such a practical sign. What we may envision in Sagittarius and hope for and dream about and long for has to be undertaken in a most practical manner as we climb that mountain with all of its difficulties. But some of the most practical and concrete people are the mountain climbers I've seen. I've seen them on the steep inclines, and every move becomes essential and has to be guarded with real surveillance. Do I dare to do this? Where is the next place of support? Can I link? Can I attach my piton? Or will I fall down and die? So initiation is extremely practical in that respect. Well, I think we have a little more, not many. Maybe we finish this part the next time. And then I've also extracted some other references to the second initiation. They may be duplicates, so I'll probably recognize that. But if there's something else, I'll bring them in. We do remember this initiation lies before. So many of us DK students have taken the first initiation by and large. The sincere students among them, a casual interest in DK and an aspirant's attitude of, yeah, I like it, and I put it down, and I'll pick it up and I put it down. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the true aspirant. The true aspirant, all true aspirants have taken the first initiation, and they have a certain stability and steadiness in that. So let us at least number ourselves as a true aspirant. So this is the end of second initiation compilation program number 10. And our day today is the 20th of June. And let's just say beginning of SIC, the same thing program number 11, and hopefully today I'll be able to continue more of it. We study hard. You know, the danger for the second ray is overabsorption in study and not and failing to apply or to sense the whole and yet to stand apart, which still shows the individual under the limitation of egotism or egoism. But the great material has been given, and we concentrate our mind, fed by the light of the soul, to assimilate, understand, apply, serve, uplift. We do our best. Okay, hopefully all the sound is coming through as it should be, and I'll be back. We'll see you later.